Our second video will focus on the pedagogy of the student edition. Before you flip to page 1 of Ways of the World, spend some time with the Historical Thinking Skills Primer, found after the table of contents and list of maps and features. With an increased emphasis on historical thinking skills in the redesigned AP course, it's important for your students to understand and practice the 4 skills emphasized in AP World History. Beyond examining each of these skills, the Skills Primer gives you 10 exercises for you to do in your classroom. These exercises use examples from the book, so you can do them before your class begins or as you move through the chapters. We recommend that you give your students some exercises from the Skills Primer over summer vacation or before you begin your class in September. Once you've covered the importance of historical thinking skills with your class, it's time to dive into the text itself. We'll take a look at some of the key features your students should pay attention to in their copy of Ways of the World. We suggest highlighting these features with your classroom. The first thing you'll notice is the unique 6-part structure of the textbook itself. Your students should know the periodization of the redesigned AP World History exam. Organizing history into 6 distinct periods encourages students to trace changes and continuities over time and grasp connections between political, economic, social, and cultural events. We're going to focus on Chapter 3 for this professional development. Chapter 3 is in Part 2. Each part opens with a big picture essay, which provides an overview of the time period your students will be studying. The big picture essay introduces students to key concepts and vital themes that they will study throughout this period of world history. You can assign this as a reading assignment before you get started teaching this part of the textbook. Another feature at the beginning of each part is landmarks, a chronological timeline of key events and processes that the part will cover. While it's important to teach thematically, your students can use this timeline as a reference point as they move throughout the text. Understanding AP themes brings the framework into your students' focus by outlining the themes they will be studying in the beginning of each part. The AP themes are split into environment, cultures, state building, economics, and social structures, and will help your students identify the important forces shaping each time period and make connections between chapters. As your students are reading the narrative of Ways of the World, there are 2 marginal annotations that I want to point out here. The first is Seeking the Main Point, which appears at the beginning of each chapter and focuses your students' attention on an important chapter theme. If you plan on assigning reading and note-taking, make sure your students are focusing around the Seeking the Main Point question. We also provide guided reading questions that help your students focus on what's important. This is another great tool for note-taking and chapter outlines. AP exam tips are for your students and give them advice for the exam in May. Snapshot boxes are throughout the chapter and offer your students a brief look at particular themes, regions, or time periods and add more detail to the thematic approach to world history. Zooming in also gives more details compared to the big picture approach of the rest of Ways of the World. It provides a close examination of a person, place, or event. To prepare your students for the DBQ, we provide you with Working with Evidence, which appears at the end of each chapter. This will help your students practice reading and writing with primary sources, and an assignment you should integrate in your course as often as possible. The Practicing AP Historical Thinking feature asks your students to apply what they've learned in the chapter through the use of historical thinking skills. Assign these prior to the end of chapter test or during exam prep. Along with the Practicing AP Historical Thinking, assign the Reflections essay to your students to read in order to show examples of how to use historical thinking skills to answer provocative questions about world history. The chapter review is divided into 2 parts. The first asks your students the significance of key terms, people, and events. Instead of simply defining the term, they should identify why it is important in their study of world history. After that, big picture questions make sure your students have understood and analyzed what they've just learned. At the end of each part, we provide AP exam practice, including multiple choice questions, short answer questions, a document-based question, and a long essay question. Thank you for watching. Our next video will focus on the teacher's materials.